Okay, and now we're back to close this out. So just a couple more to move through. Let's talk about then virality and contagion. That Sampson's suggestion is virality, contagion theory in the age of networks. And so we're talking network and social media here. There's greater potential for ever more diverse forms of contagion, and now social, economic, racial, ethnic, political are all available to us. And notice that there's all these different groups that are available on the internet that kind of specialize in these different areas. And the contagions of emotion, of affect, affect the very nature of our discourse. So to the extent that emotion can be transmitted through these media, which I think it can be pretty successfully, and we should be looking at some examples of that as we move through the class, right? Even the smallest events have potential to demonstrate high levels of contagion and high levels of emotional activation, or rapid increases in the affective flux, if you will. Even if we don't want to name a specific emotion, then the affect response. And we are operating under the lack of the guiding hand, that is the village hierarchy, as Riker had previously discussed. So we're kind of up for grabs where these free agents that the internet can exploit to the extent that it wants. In this affective stream, one of my rules that I try to live by here, I'm up in the Caddock. This is the master bedroom up here, and we come up here every night at 8 p.m. and do a treat time, a treat circle with all the cats, and then we kind of just chill out until it's time to pass out, fall asleep, right, after our long days. One thing that I try to keep out of this room post 8 p.m. is there is no social media. There's no Twitter or anything else. I need to let that stuff go so that I can have a good night's sleep and not get jacked up about it. I don't want my affective stream tweaked all to hell when it's bedtime. So if I go to sleep about 10 p.m., 10:30, I know, I'm old. You guys can stop laughing anytime you want. Thank you. I don't need that before I go to bed, and I don't want it, and I'm willing to manipulate my environmental stimuli so that I'm not subjected to it, right? So let's talk a little bit about synambulism. It's a cool word to say if nothing else. Synambulism and mindlessness. Ellen Langer, we can credit with mindfulness. So obviously mindlessness is what she was responding to. Tarde, its contagion occurs through imitation and suggestibility, and these are largely non-conscious processes, as we can see, evidenced by Chartrand and Barge, among others that we've been discussing throughout, but conscious processes can operate as well. To stop sleepwalking through life, one can educate the senses and enter a state of anti-feelings, right? And feelings are, can be a real easy way to not think about the environment. We operate on the basis of feelings. We allow others to, kind of manipulate our feelings through what we expose ourselves to, let's say in social media, and that we disconnect in a sense from ourselves and give ourselves over to those that would influence us. So we become synambulistic. We sleepwalk through life reacting to the stimuli that are directed towards us, that manipulate us, so to speak. And so to be able to shut that stuff off, or not respond to it, or not react to it, or not engage, or not even expose ourselves to it, might allow us to take greater control over our own emotional well-being and our own emotional responses. So we might, in some terms, talk about not caring as apathy. This is different than that, right? Because this is making a choice not necessarily to be affected. But it requires being more mindful of how stimuli affect us, and Langer would want us to do that, right? So affect can be limited to being perceived as information. That is, I don't run my life on affect. My affective stream fluctuates, but as I become more mindful of the fluctuations as they occur, and then I'm able to associate them, right, with environmental stimuli, I understand now how stimuli affect my affective stream, and now it loses some of its potential to control me because of my awareness, and I can correct for it. Because once I become aware of how this works, then I can begin to sit in the driver's seat to become more mindful and make decisions about, do I want this to affect me? do I want to be affected, right? Hence I shut off the internet at certain times because I no longer want to be affected by it. I'm okay with me and what's rattling around in between my two ears, and sometimes maybe I'll just be mindful of that, right? So combating synambulism and mindlessness, well, actively refuse to assume group characteristics. You like that picture? I love that picture. That is a wicked awesome picture, right? So refuse to assume the group characteristics. Understand that people will try to manipulate you, that are going to try to make you think this is right or this is wrong or this is the way I should dress or this is what I should do to be cool or whatever. And so maybe we can shun fashion, customs, language, etc. that are the core of civilization that one maybe wishes not to merge with. That is, I have a choice. Holy shit, I have a choice to merge with this or not. Rather than mindfully just adopt it and merge with it, I mean mindlessly, do that. I mindfully say, pick and choose. No, I don't really like the way that smells. I think I'm going to stay the hell away from it, right? So we become more in charge of ourselves. We become or increase our autonomy. So, a couple other points. Fuchs then, psychosocial theorization, social surroundings, interconnections are emphasized, minimizing the divisions between the inside and the outside world. So what I'm talking about is the outside world does affect my inside world. So I'm now going to become mindful of how that works, what the process is, how I'm affected, and then make choices about being affected or not to the extent that I can. So the emphasis shifts to understand the group as an entity where individual is really subject to internalizations of the group which the individual belongs. So now, just because I'm a member of this group doesn't mean that I need to self-stereotype and doesn't mean that I need to adopt all their values or their emotional settings, right? So groups might be more fundamental than the individual in this regard, which is really kind of turning the relationship on its head. And it creates a social unconscious the individual adopts through the socialization process. So synambulism takes us down that path and we mindlessly go along with the group and adopt their ideas. Mindfulness allows us to understand the group's effects and allows us to pick and choose whether we want to participate or not, right? So, do you want your mind to be the group mind? Or does that sound unappealing and you maybe want to, kind of counter against that? So, I want to talk just a moment here about this idea of tone. I don't see myself as a brilliant psychological theorist, but on the other hand, I am willing to entertain new ideas, to float these ideas and see if they gain traction in the world of psychology. And one that I want to kind of advance here is the addition of tone to capture the fourth dimension. And I said that would be a core component of the class is how does this shit change over time, right? So the addition of tone to capture the fourth dimension, the longest duration, we have emotion. And we'll get to the definition, but emotions are usually short-lived, right? Have a pretty finite time span. Moods can persist for a longer time, and that's part of the definition of a mood, and it also differentiates emotion and mood. But I want to advance maybe the concept of tone, and this might allow for a more epochal view that is consistent with much of the foregoing in this chapter, that we enter into a period of time. So my emotion might persist for maybe an hour, maybe 2 hours, right, before it begins to dissipate. A mood might persist over a couple days to a week. But a tone is maybe a social reaction to kind of a social phenomenon, right? So, for example, how would you describe the tone of 2020? Does that make any sense at all? Has this period of time, we're into it for 9 months now, is there a certain tone? Is there a certain undercurrent? Is there a certain way that it affects our affective state and or the emotions that we might ascribe to the analysis of those affects? Does a tone persist longer than that? So, I mean, that's just something to consider. Again, for a lot of this stuff, there's no right answer, there's no wrong answer. It's one of the reasons I love the study of emotion, because it's ever evolving, and many theories, kind of hold equal plausibility and have ample evidence to support them. So it's wide open. It's like kind of going out to the wild, wild west as we envisioned it. We can make it what we want, and we can become who we. That's where we could realize our individuality, and in this case, our individuality in thinking, and our relationship with our emotions. So there we go, and so much for Lecture 5. Let's move on with our lives. I hope you guys have a great day, and check out the asters. I think I have to grow asters. I haven't grown asters for about 2 years, and man, they were absolutely beautiful. So I think next year I'm going to grow some asters just because they're freaking awesome. So take care, guys.